It was the summer of 2014. That year, my entire family flew to Greece for our annual vacation. I had been counting down the days, eager for this trip. When we finally arrived, my uncle was already waiting for us at the airport. We loaded our luggage into the trunk of his old Mercedes and made our way to the village. Some of our relatives were already there to greet us when we pulled up. Welcome, they smiled, and we all sat down to eat, while swapping stories, some about Germany, others about Greece and the old times. The next few days were peaceful. I enjoyed the sun, the fresh village air, and tried to unwind. One afternoon, I heard a car horn honk in front of our house. I opened the door and saw my cousin grinning, waving me over. "Hop on," he said. "Let's go for a ride." He was sitting on a brand new BMW motorcycle, the sunlight gleaming off the chrome. He held the handlebars with pride, clearly excited. I hesitated for a moment, but the weather was perfect and I had nothing better to do. So I slipped on my shoes and climbed on. We rode along a long country road, winding uphill and downhill through narrow paths. There wasn't much traffic, but the roads were tight and occasionally sharp. Eventually, we reached the top of a hill where a small tavern sat overlooking the valley. We took a short break there before heading back. My cousin had always been the type who chased speed. He loved the adrenaline. He was usually a careful driver, but that day, luck wasn't with us. The last thing I remember was him veering into the opposite lane to avoid a truck. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital room. I was wearing an eye shield, and I could hear the soft voices of my mother and father nearby. "Where am I?" I asked. "What happened?" Then it started coming back to me in pieces. I reached up and removed the eye shield, but realized my eyes were still bandaged. My mother's voice trembled as she explained. "You've got glass fragments in your eyes. The accident had been worse than I imagined. The doctors were trying their best, but they warned me I might lose my eyesight." My parents stayed calm, tried to soothe me, but I could tell they were worried. After a while, it was time for them to leave. I eventually drifted off into sleep. Later that night, I was woken by the sound of movements. Someone else was in the room. "Who's there?" I asked. "My name is Eleni," came a soft female voice. "I'm here with you, don't worry." "Thank you for your kind words," I replied. "I had an accident. There's glass in my eyes." "Yes, I know," she said gently. "I heard about it, but don't worry, you'll be fine. I'll help you." It was comforting to hear her. I was grateful I wasn't alone in that room. "I'm glad you're here," I said. "But why are you in the hospital?" "Don't worry, Alex," she replied. "I'm here to watch over you. There's nothing wrong with me." I laughed a little. She clearly didn't want to share her story, but that didn't matter. I was just relieved to have someone to talk to during those endless hours. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, how did she know my name? Maybe she had heard my parents talking earlier. "Thank you, Eleni," I said. "I wish I could see you, but, as you can see, my eyes are still covered." "That doesn't matter, Alex," she said. "One day, you will see me." We kept talking over the next few days. It felt amazing to open up, to be heard. I told her about my dreams, my fears, my life back home. Oddly, she seemed to already know many of the things I shared. But something strange kept happening every time a nurse came in, or when my parents visited. Eleni was nowhere to be heard. She vanished so completely that I started to think maybe she was just incredibly shy. Still, each day, she'd return. She'd sit beside my bed, comforting me, whispering words of encouragement. One day she gently placed her hand over my eyes and told me not to worry, that I would get better soon. That night, I slept deeper than I had in days. When I woke up, I heard the doctor and my parents talking. "All right," the doctor said. "We can remove the bandages today." They carefully peeled the layers away, and to everyone's relief, I could see. My vision was back. I hadn't lost my eyesight. "You're very lucky." The doctor told me it was a close one. I looked to the right, expecting to see Eleni's bed, maybe even thank her properly now that I could see. But all I saw was a plain window, no second bed. Confused, I turned back. "Where's the other bed?" I asked. The doctor paused. "What bed?" "The one next to me, where Eleni was staying." He frowned. "There was never another bed here. You've been in this room alone the entire time." I was stunned. "What? No. There was a woman here. She talked to me every night. Her name was Eleni. She promised I'd be okay." My mother began to cry silently. The doctor's face softened. "Young man," he said gently, "you've been alone in this room from the moment they admitted you." There was no Eleni, but I could still hear her voice in my mind, warm, calm, comforting. She'd promised I'd recover. and I left the hospital a few days later. I was healthy. I could see, just like Eleni said I would. I've always appreciated being alone, the kind of silence you only find far from cell towers, where your only companions are the wind and your own thoughts, loud and unfiltered. That's why I chose a primitive campsite off a rugged dirt path in Montana's Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest. It wasn't listed on the official Forest Service maps, but a hiker in an online forum described it as hidden, peaceful, and rarely visited. It sounded perfect. I'd been overwhelmed at work deadlines piling up, people constantly talking, and I needed a break. So I took Friday off, loaded up my old pickup, and drove the 6 hours from Spokane. The last 2 hours were nothing but dusty dirt roads, no gas stations, no signs, just wilderness. The road was rough, but nothing I hadn't handled before. When I finally arrived, it was late afternoon. The clearing was exactly as described, flat, tucked beside a shallow creek, surrounded by tall pines. No cell signal, just the sounds of insects and rustling leaves. But one thing caught me off guard. There was already a tent there, a faded blue one, leaning awkwardly at one corner like it had weathered some storms and no one had bothered to fix it. No car nearby, no campfire, no gear. It looked abandoned. I got out of my truck and circled it a few times. No footprints, no recent disturbance. I even called out, "Hello, anyone around?" Nothing. I figured someone had left it behind, or maybe it was dumped. People do strange things. So I set up my own tent about 30 feet away, still close enough to keep an eye on the strange tent just in case. It was a warm July day, but as the sun sank below the ridge, the forest cooled rapidly. I made a quick dinner on my propane stove and sat by the creek with a beer, watching daylight fade into darkness. By 9:30, I needed my headlamp to see anything. Still no sign of anyone. That other tent just sat there, sagging. I tried not to let it bother me, probably just forgotten by some backpacker. Around 11, I crawled into my tent and zipped it shut. That's when the mood of the forest shifted. If you've ever camped alone, you know the difference between normal forest sounds, wind through branches, distant sound, the kind of sound that doesn't quite belong. First, there was a faint rustling, then a sharp crack like a branch snapping where no one should be. I told myself it was a deer, but then, near midnight, I heard voices, not loud, whispered like two people trying not to be heard, but close, 30 feet at most. My heart slammed in my chest. I turned off my lantern and sat still, listening hard. Every part of me hoped it was just hikers or local kids messing around. But these weren't teenagers being loud and careless. These voices were calm, steady, unbothered, that I could hear them. Then the voices stopped. I waited 10 minutes, maybe more. I didn't breathe too loud. My tent was dark, but the moonlight filtered through the trees enough to see faint shadows. Then something moved. Right outside my tent the zipper tugged once, deliberate. Not the wind, not an accident. Panic took over, or maybe instinct. I grabbed the handgun my uncle insisted I bring and shouted, "I have a gun. I will shoot." The zipper froze. I fired one round straight up through the roof of the tent. The gunshot echoed like a bomb in the still forest. My ears rang, but the silence that followed was worse. I waited, then I shouted again, "Who's out there?" No answer, no footsteps, nothing but silence. I didn't sleep at all. I just sat, clutching the gun, listening to the forest slowly return to its normal nighttime rhythm. The whispers never came back. When the first light of dawn spilled across the trees, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. The air felt strangely heavy. I glanced toward the blue tent and Frozette was gone, not torn down, not collapsed, gone. I walked over to where it had been. No tent, no fabric, no trash, just a patch of flattened grass. I checked again. Maybe I was misremembering the spot, but it was the same clearing. And now it was empty. Then I noticed the footprints all around my tent, circling it, deep, heavy boot prints. Some doubled back, others were side by side, like two people had stood next to each other for a while. They weren't mine. Different tread, wider, heavier. I didn't hesitate. I packed everything, tent, gear, cooler, tossed it all into the truck in under 15 minutes. Didn't eat, didn't brush my teeth, just drove fast, eyes flicking between the road and my rearview mirror. The whole time I didn't stop until I reached Lincoln and finally got cell service. When I calmed down enough, I called the Helena Ranger Station, gave them the trail name, GPS coordinates, everything. The woman on the phone paused, then asked me to repeat the info. She finally said, "Sir, we don't maintain any campsites in that area. That trail hasn't been serviced since last fall due to flooding. Are you sure you were there?" I was certain she asked if I wanted to file a report. I declined. What would I even say? Nothing was taken, I didn't actually see anyone, nothing was broken. Just strange that night never left me the voices. But tent, the footprints, and the fact that the Forest Service claims that site shouldn't even exist. But what really sticks with me is the gun. I almost didn't bring it. I'm not a firearm kind of guy. Never have been. But my uncle insisted, said, "You're going that deep alone, take it, just for peace of mind." He's old school, raised on gut instincts and common sense. He even gave me the ammo himself. If I hadn't fired that shot, I honestly don't know what would have happened, whatever. Or whoever was on the other side of that zipper, they weren't just curious. They were waiting, watching, and deadly silent. When they wanted to be, that kind of silence doesn't belong to animals, and I've never gone back. Won't even browse camping forums anymore. Because sometimes, when I think too long about it, I get this sinking feeling, what if that old blue tent wasn't there when I arrived? What if it was put up after I went to sleep? And what if it wasn't just left behind? What if it was bait? It was the first week of July 2012, when I took my daughter, Emily, to the annual summer carnival held in Santa Cruz, California. One of those charming small-town events, bright tents, sugar-dusted treats, and the glow of carnival rides dancing. Across the evening sky, Emily was 6 years old back then, lively, full of energy, her eyes lit up with every colorful sight we passed. We arrived just as the sun was sinking, casting a golden-pink hue over everything. The salty breeze from the nearby ocean mingled with the cheerful laughter of children and the soft, nostalgic tunes playing from the carousel. It was picture perfect. We wandered through the festival for about an hour. Emily begged to ride the Ferris wheel and spent way too long trying to win a stuffed llama at a ring toss. By 8 p.m., the carnival was alive. Families, couples, teenagers, with glowing cotton candy in hand, all enjoying the buzz of a carefree night. After a wild round in the bumper cars, Emily tugged on my arm and pointed excitedly toward the food court. She wanted ice cream. The area was packed, humming with chatter and sizzling grills. I joined the line for a frozen treat, holding her little hand tightly, but the wait was slow, and she grew impatient. Her attention turned to a glowing cotton candy cart just a few feet away. She asked if she could go see it up close. I hesitated, but it seemed harmless, just a few steps away, still clearly visible. I reminded her firmly to stay where I could see her and watched as she skipped over. Mesmerized by the swirling pink and blue sugar behind the glass, then came the distraction, a loud burst of laughter. Someone spilled a drink behind me. I instinctively turned to glance. It couldn't have been more than a second or two. But when I turned back, Emily was gone. Panic surged through me, called her name, loud and sharp, trying to keep my voice steady. My eyes scanned every face, every corner of the food court. Nothing. The cotton candy stand was empty. I shoved through the crowd, dread swelling in my chest. I checked behind booths, under tables, around corners. Each second crawled, every breath tighter than the last. My voice cracked as I shouted her name again, louder this time, then faintly. I heard a child crying. I followed the sound to the edge of the food court, behind a closed popcorn stall, and there, crouched low, near the back, was Emily, sobbing, eyes wide and full of fear. Beside her knelt a man. He had one hand resting gently on her shoulder. When he looked up at me, he wore a calm, almost too calm expression. She looked lost and came over to me. He said smoothly, standing up. There was something wrong. I felt it instantly. He wore a plain outfit, jeans, a white t-shirt, a baseball cap pulled down over his eyes. But those eyes, too intense, too cold, and his stance, too stiff. Emily reached for me the second she saw me, bursting into louder sobs. I picked her up, holding her tight against me, eyes still locked on the man. He didn't seem nervous. He didn't step back. He just stood there, too close, too steady. My gut screamed at me. Something was very wrong. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked fast, straight into the crowd with Emily in my arms. I flagged down the first carnival security guard I could find, but when I turned to point him out, the man was gone just like that, vanished into the mass of festival goers like a ghost. My stomach dropped. Security took us to a small office near the entrance. They asked questions, called in a description over their radios. The police showed up soon after. I gave a full report. Emily stayed close to me the entire time, refusing to let go, too shaken to clearly explain what had happened. While we sat in that cramped little office, I watched the carnival outside continue as if nothing had happened, lights flashing, laughter ringing out while I sat there, barely holding myself together. It felt like I was watching the world from the wrong side of a window, a nightmare unfolding in plain sight. Almost an hour later, one of the security guards came back and pulled the detective aside. Their hushed conversation made my stomach twist. Then the detective walked over to me again, his face serious. Had found something right behind the same popcorn booth where Emily had been discovered: zip ties and empty candy wrappers. He didn't need to explain. I understood immediately that man hadn't just stumbled across a lost child. He was prepared, calm, calculated, ready to act without drawing suspicion. They told me quietly, but clearly, that he likely spotted Emily the moment she stepped away from me. That it wasn't an impulse. The zip ties told the rest of the story. We were escorted out shortly after. I drove home in silence, glancing constantly into the rearview mirror, watching Emily sleep peacefully, her innocent face completely unaware of how close we came to losing everything. The police said they'd investigate, but no arrest was ever made. He vanished, gone into the warm night like a shadow. Days turned 2 weeks. We never heard anything more, but I was never the same. Every festival after that, every busy park or public event, I couldn't relax, I couldn't forget. And to this day, when July rolls around, I find myself watching crowds more closely, searching faces for someone I shouldn't recognize but do because maybe he's still out there, watching, waiting, and the scariest part of all, while my daughter was lucky others might not be.